This is a Rogue Media Network podcast.
Fee for Service Dentist Podcast. Dr. Sonny Spira is your host. Today, our guest, Dr. Amy Adair, pediatric dentist in Virginia, tells her story from Navy doc to second generation pediatric dentist to gaining her pediatric dentistry and going into practice, buying a practice, then adding 2 more insurance plans, which she regretted. And then in the course of 18 months, she dropped each one sequentially. How did she do it? Why did she do it? And what determined the plan? And how did she set up her SOPs? Great show. I think you're going to pick up a lot. Wonderful guest. Thanks, Dr. Grazioso, for recommending Amy to us. She was fantastic. As always, the Fee for Service podcast brought to you by Kettenbach Dental. Kettenbach is excited to announce the first major advancement in fluoride varnish. No more alcohol resin. Patients now will want this new treatment, which leaves a smooth and silky, lubricious feeling. No more grit. Contact Kettenbach today for more details and do more varnishes patients will appreciate. Call 877-532-2123 or visit kettenbachusa.com. If you like the show, click like, share it with your friends, subscribe. It's on YouTube. It's on all things where you can get all your podcasts, iTunes, Spotify, etc. If you don't like it, well, please tell me, sonnyspira@gmail.com, or you can text or call me at 607-624-2962. Enjoy the show, folks.
My name is Drew Burns, and I'm a part of a small group of dentists who believe something crazy. We believe that the standard of care is just not good enough. We demand the best of ourselves and the best for our patients. We believe that the best way? No, the only way to practice dentistry is on our own terms. If you ask the dental consultants or the corporate CEOs, they tell you that what we're doing isn't smart, that fee-for-service dentistry is dead, and that the golden age of dentistry is over. Yet, while others focus on profits first, we focus on the patient first. And yet our offices are some of the most profitable in the entire country because we invest in ourselves and we are doing things right. It's our name on the door and it's our reputation on the line. My name is Drew Burns and I am a fee-for-service dentist. This is the Fee-for-Service Dentist Podcast and these are our stories.
Welcome to the Fee for Service Dentist Podcast. Dr. Sonny Spira. Today we have a special guest, Dr. Amy Adair, who we had contact from Christine Grazioso. Said, hey, Amy, you should do this. And very happily volunteered. And I've had some really nice back and forth conversations with, and I'm very excited to talk to her today. Let's give you some background first, please. She is a second generation pediatric dentist. This is important as her father really shaped her values in practice ownership. Graduated from UConn School of Dental Medicine in 2007 on a Navy scholarship. So she's a proud NCAA national champion basketball fan for the last 2 years, Danny Hurley and the boys. Served as a U.S. Navy dentist for 8 years, 3 years as a GP, including a short deployment overseas. Finished the Navy obligation working at Walter Reed Bethesda Hospital as a staff pediatric dentist. Consultant for Naval Postgraduate Dental School Bethesda, where she lectures annually for Nitrous, Oxide, and Pediatric Dentistry CE courses, and is a private practice owner in Burke, Virginia. A little bit about her practice. She purchased an existing 17-year-old practice from a retiring dentist. Solo doctor, has a team of 6, 4 full-time employees, 1 dental assistant, 1 hygienist, 1 admin/DA, and 2 part-time employees. She has chosen to stay in network with TRICARE to serve the population, the military population. And her husband is a retired USMC helicopter pilot who has flown 3 presidents and now currently works in cybersecurity. We have 2 boys, aged 10 and 11, and baseball is life. Of course it is. So please welcome Dr. Amy Adair. How are you doing, Amy?
I'm doing wonderful. Thanks for having me, Sonny.
So thanks for being on. And this is early morning recording. We're both early morning people, so we're rolling with it. So let's jump right in. Talk about your relationship with your dad. being a general, he was a pediatric dentist. Want to give us a little of his background?
Sure. I actually followed a lot in my dad's footsteps, where he joined the Navy for a couple of years as well out of
Oh, wow.
dental school. And then he went and did his residency in pediatrics before, starting his practice. He even purchased an existing practice within his community, our community growing up. And he took that and grew that into his own practice. And I believe he practiced for 30 to 35 years, if I can do the math correctly.
Do you know
And
approximately generation, like when he graduated?
76.
Okay. All right. So
And
in that generation, people always say, "Oh, guys would hang shingles and stuff," but
Mhm.
not necessarily all the time.
Yeah, no, my dad worked hard through his entire career of ownership. And one of the really cool things is, now that I'm in that, he and I share a lot of really candid conversations about the highs and lows of ownership. And when I approach him with certain things, he said, yeah, I've had to deal with that as well, and here's what I've done. And it really shows a lot about how, being a small business owner, especially in dentistry, some things have remained the same, and some things have changed and evolved. And it's really makes for a fun talk, and it really is a neat relationship that he and I have.
It's funny because Bob Pick talks about it all the time, like get a mentor, get someone, to help guide you. And I do find, and myself included, have some really key people in my life that I have gone to many, many, many times, or have just called and just chew the fat and just, pick their brain a little bit. Sometimes they're picking mine. It's very beneficial. So having that relationship with your father, and I have my son now practicing with me too. So it's kind of an interesting dynamic. I can appreciate it more. What were do you remember a couple of the things that you came up with, like an example of one of those scenarios where you called your dad and you're like, hey, what's going on with this?
I can with staffing. When I always thought that my dad had the same team for 30 years, and that he never had any issues with, getting, having his team and whatnot. But it actually, turned out that no, there were, a core group that had remained with him for, 20 plus years. But early on, there was a little bit of shifting as he was, transitioning from purchasing the practice. And he did have to deal with some embezzlement at one point, and having to navigate those things. So, understanding that as an employer, we're never 100% of the time going to have a perfect staffing scenario, and that just navigating through those, that will probably never change.
Yep. Yep. It really doesn't, and it's funny that probably the coolest thing is that you never picked up on it, that was seamless for him.
Yeah. But the flip side of it is, I am still very close friends with his former team members. Three of them I can think of: his hygienist, his one of his main dental assistants, and his front desk administrator. They're all still very near and dear to my heart. And I'll reach out to them a lot as well if I need some mentorship or advice within my practice.
I was going to ask you, because you talked about the size of your team. I thought pediatric dentists, their setup is a fair bit different than general dentists in terms of their use of their auxiliaries, right? How do you manage your day? What's an average day look like?
That's a really good question. My average day may be a little bit different than other pediatric dental offices. I have my office space, the entire space might be less than 1,000 square feet.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there are 4 chairs within my space. two
Okay.
semi-open bay and then two closed off, more private rooms.
Now, are
And
those private rooms soundproofed or sound deadened in any way?
not really.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. We'll close the door and to kind of muffle the sound if we need to with it.
Okay.
And so my typical day is for the first couple of hours of the day, I will see 3 columns of hygiene patients. So it'll be either 2 assistants and a hygienist, or seeing those 3 patients. Or if I'm down an assistant, I will see one of the hygiene patients. An assistant will see a hygiene patient, and a hygienist will see a hygiene patient for the first couple of hours of the day. Then in the middle part of the day, things quiet down, and that's when I'll do the majority of my restorative procedures. That's our 10 to 1 hour, which generally is harder to fill in the world of pediatrics because of school. So I might run only 2 columns, one for hygiene and one for restorative. And then at the end of the day, when school is running out from that 2 to 5 timeframe, I'll go back to 3 columns of primarily hygiene. I joke that my office is a kind of a prophy palace in that I would say 90% of what we do in our practice is prevention based.
Okay. Well, it's interesting that you said your assistants are seeing hygiene patients. So in what state are you practicing? Maryland?
I practice in Virginia, where
Virginia.
assistants are allowed to prophy polish.
Okay. All right. Well, that makes sense. Good for you. And do you schedule, or do you have any block scheduling? Like, do you say, listen, nitrous case, some stainless steel crowns and pulps, and or sedation, like blocks, or do you do any of that stuff?
Yes, and that's been key with being able to maintain a predictable schedule in my day. And what I explained is essentially the block scheduling, where any of my restorative patients, I only do nitrous. I do not do any sedation.
Okay. All right.
So I'll do 1 hour blocks for my nitrous patients from that 10 to 1 hour. And occasionally I'll do a 2 o'clock one as well if they're a older kiddo.
So probably the majority of your production occurs in that 3-hour period.
Actually, no, the majority of my production is with hygiene.
Oh, okay. Now, 10 to 1. So I'm assuming you work 8 to 5. Are you taking a lunch break?
Yes, 8 to 5, and then lunch is from 1 to 2.
1 to 2. Okay. Well, that makes sense. That's actually smart. I go 7 to 1 is what my day is, or 7 to 12 if we have a lunch break. But I usually, I just work 6 hours straight. All right. So talk about your Navy experience, because it's really interesting. So you went into the Navy as a general dentist, or did you go into the Navy as a pediatric dentist when you graduated dental school?
I went in as a general dentist.
Okay.
And so after graduating from University of Connecticut, then I was stationed at Camp Lejeune, North Carolina.
Okay. And you said you did 3 years as a GP, right? So you would typically have what, 4-year payback?
Correct.
Okay,
I just happened to get picked up to do pediatric residency training before my 4-year payback was done through the Navy. And so that extra year got tacked on at the end as being a pediatric dentist.
Okay, so you did 3 years as a GP, then I'm assuming you did your 1-year residency in GP?
No, it was a 2-year residency for
2 years.
pediatrics.
Okay, so 2 years. So now you technically owe them 6. 2 years of residency while you're in. So that's 3, that's 5. And then you owe them the 3 more. So those are 8 years. Okay. All right. Any experiences that you had in your, here and overseas that you'd like to tell people that are kind of unique to the Navy experience?
Being stationed on a Marine Corps base. So the Marine Corps, I joke with my husband because he's a Marine, but they fall under the Department of the Navy. So therefore the Navy is a little bit better than the Marine Corps. And so therefore the Marine Corps.
Wait, hold on. You really want to put that dig out there? That it just was recorded. You realize it?
I know. But
that little barb, I didn't miss it.
Just a little dig for him.
A little tiny bit.
So the Marine Corps relies on the Navy for medical and dental services. So Navy dentists and Navy physicians will be on Marine Corps bases to serve, those needs. And so, boy, it was a lot of fun working with the Marines. You kind of just kind of get into their culture and their way of life. And I just remember on so many occasions being stationed there that, I mean, we'd go to the shooting range. That was a requirement. We were required to work out. We were, there were all of these other different, parts with being in the military that, like, I would think back and think, man, like if I went right into, a dental practice, I would never get this kind of experience with it. And what I didn't realize until the backside, after completing my 8 years of service, was the leadership experience that I gained while in the military, because you are forced, you don't really have much of a choice, but there's so many different personalities and types of people and leadership examples that I picked up on. Some were good, some were bad, but also just learning how to deal with so many different personality types and being able to kind of figure out how to get all those different personality types to achieve the mission that needed to be done at hand. And that more than anything prepared me for ownership.
That's such an undervalued trait. And I think we see sometimes, well, you should own your practice, you should do this. I said, not everybody's cut out for it. Like you might be a great dentist and you might just love to treat patients, but all the other things that go along with it and leading the team that's a big deal. And people that thrive, I think, are the people who understand it, but accept it and like almost relish the challenge, right? Like, how do I get this ship moving and then altering my course? And that's not cutting your preps. That's not, posting dental clinical pearls, dental vision. No, that's about really running a business like you would, a grocery store, a computer repair store. It doesn't matter. You have to run your organization, right?
Mm-hmm. It's interesting that you say that when, of course, we all dealt with 2020 and COVID, and that challenge of, redirecting our ships, our offices to be able to practice in, the safe environment. I had literally put step by step an SOP, standard operating procedures, for how we were going to do things. I got my team together. I gave them what I thought was the SOP, for moving forward.
Sure.
And then I said, I need your buy-in. This is my perspective, but I need your perspective as well so that we can have a well-rounded approach to this. And then this is one of those distinctive moments that I remember. We were all sitting in my little waiting room, and I put my elbows on my knees and leaned forward. And I said, y'all, I feel like I have been preparing for this my entire life. Let's do this. But my team, they felt it. They said, we got this. We can do this. We can do this in a safe manner. They felt safe moving forward with what we were doing. And that, to me, was a very pivotal moment in ownership and leadership for me, and, steering that ship in the right direction.
Yeah, I remember it vividly, what was going on. And we had our challenges too with the multiple offices and the different vibes in the different offices, but developing how are we going to do this? And yeah. And there were some, now we got, 60 plus people that eventually, that were like terrified, and needed more time, or, because you've been isolated for 2, 3, 4 months, whatever it is. And, just to come out of that was difficult for some.
Mm-hmm.
But, moving forward, we had a new a new strength, a new vision. So, but
Mhm.
that's great. That's like a test, right?
Yeah.
You were
But
tested and
yeah,
come out
and
the other side better.
yep. And if you think about it, that was almost a test to, just to jump into um, becoming a fee for service provider. This was a huge test for me of like, how am I going to get my team buy-in? How are we going to redirect our ship with this practice to become insurance independent?
Well, let's get into it. So when did you finish your Navy requirements and when did you get out in private practice? Let's talk about that transition now. So
Sure. I got out, I finished my Navy requirements in 2015.
2015.
And then I worked as an associate pediatric dentist within my area for 3 years.
3 years. Okay.
Mhm.
Is it the area that you grew up in? Is it the area that you were stationed at? What area were you at for those 3 years?
In Northern Virginia, where we are now. So this is where we were stationed, and my husband and I had made the decision that we wanted to stay in this area to raise our children.
Okay, so you decided, all right, we're gonna go back to this area, and then you had to find the associateship. Is that the steps?
Nope, we were in this area when we were still active duty in the military, and so
Okay, so
we
you
remained.
so rather than move, you stayed.
Yes.
So you went from active to um, now full civilian, and then okay, all right. So while you were in active duty, did you have relationships with any of the pediatric dentists around you?
Yes, the one who I bought the practice from. We had kind of this like handshake deal. When we first moved to this area, there was my neighbor across the street. Oh, you're a pediatric dentist in the Navy? I said, oh yeah, and she's retired. And she said, oh, one of my best friends is a pediatric dentist right down the road, and she introduced us. And so I did a little bit of moonlighting at her office while I was still active duty to get an idea of what private
That's smart.
practice was like. And so we just developed a slow growing strong relationship. I made it very clear to her that her practice was precisely the type of practice that I would love to purchase when she was ready to retire. And then I just kind of waited until she was ready to reach out to me. And she stood by her word, and we were able to make it work.
And so, you moonlighted a little bit while you were still in the Navy, but then 3 years you went as an associate. Not, I'm assuming not in that practice, but in a different one.
That is correct, because that practice did not have enough capacity to support a full-time associate.
So how did you evaluate if a practice had the capacity? Because I think a lot of young dentists that are coming out and get going or even a doctor who's thinking of bringing on an associate. How did you determine that practice had the capacity or the bandwidth, the room to bring someone in?
The one that I associated at, they were looking for an associate dentist, and so I
But
don't
what does that
know
look
how.
like? What does that mean? Did they have another associate that left? Was the doctor overburdened? Was they going to slow down? How did you see yourself, making a living there?
Yeah, the doctor was overburdened, and they needed the additional help. I think that there was an associate before me who maybe had moved on, and so there was a spot that was open.
So it's kind of like doing the work of 1.5 dentists or something, would you say?
Yes.
Okay. And then were they going to cut back a little bit so you could see yourself, okay, I could now I have 3/4 of this practice. I mean,
I think it got to maybe 50-50
mhm.
or so. And it was a really good, comfortable income,
Okay.
honestly.
Now, what did the business in that practice look like? Because you said the other practice that you had talked to the female that
Mhm.
this is the practice I want. Did this practice also have that potential? Like, what if the dentist said, "Listen, I want to get out. You going to buy me out?"
This dentist is a husband and wife team, and one is a GP, one's a pediatric dentist. And I think that there were options maybe in the future for ownership, but honestly, I kind of knew that if I joined in with the husband and wife team, I would always kind of be the odd man out.
It would be the secretary. You got president, vice president, you'd be the secretary, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. All right. So what did you learn first and foremost in the private sector business?
That learning how to navigate parental expectations for their child.
You could be a teacher, a coach, keep going, right? Parental
Yeah.
expectations. So go a little deeper with that, please.
Learning how to get on the same page with the parents' expectations, and guiding them to what we believe is best for their child in a very kind and compassionate manner. That does not happen overnight. That takes many, many years to master that. And I don't know if I ever will fully master that. But I try my hardest. That for me is once you can do that, once the doctor and the parent are on the same page with what we need to do to, help their child achieve health. When we have that, then we're able to achieve really great things.
So what's the biggest thing that's missing in that scenario? Is that the parent is just saying, oh, we can fix this in 5 minutes, or there's really not a problem here, or why are we bothering with children's teeth? What are some of the key? Because those are a lot of common things I see in general practice with kids. It's like, well, they're just baby teeth. I'm like, yeah, but you understand what that means,
I think it's making that correlation of home habits with disease. And it's not always brushing, it's more the diet. And so I do think it's a bigger problem than just within the family unit. Just the access to sugar and processed carbohydrates and whatnot is really detrimental to their health, and access to alternatives of healthy food choices is really, really a challenge.
Going out of network can be really scary, but staying in network can be even scarier and riskier too long term. Insurance reimbursements aren't even keeping pace with inflation, which can really affect the quality of your work, not to mention the quality of your life. I'm Allison Bernstein.
I'm Dr. Josh Bernstein. We went out of network over 20 years ago, and we can show you what worked, what didn't, and how you can do it with minimal risk.
ThriveOutOfNetwork.com teaches you everything you need to know, including the most important part, which is getting your team on board. It teaches them how to communicate with patients and getting them comfortable with the entire process.
Go to ThriveOutOfNetwork.com and check it out today. That's ThriveOutOfNetwork.com.
Now, as parents, if you get people that finally kind of get it and understand it, do they sometimes want to see you as a doctor?
Do the parents want to see me? You mean? Yeah.
Like, oh, I get that. I want to see a dentist just like you. You made a change in our life, and because it's almost like family nutrition counseling. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and actually, we will see some parents here and there for that reason.
I can see that. If you make a connection, wow, I really like you. Can you see me? Can you see my husband? He never goes, like that kind of thing.
Yep. I will do that, and we'll do preventive care for them, and then I will refer out for the other stuff.
Okay, so let's go into what did the business look like in your associateship? In other words, IPPO, private pay, Medicaid, or whatever, in Virginia, what they probably have some state type of care. So what did the business aspect look like, and how deep did you dive into that?
In the business aspect, it was a high PPO Medicaid practice. So it's a very high volume
Has to be.
production driven practice. Mhm.
Mhm. So what's the emphasis there? The emphasis on restore, or is the emphasis on prevention?
I think the emphasis was on not having any holes in the schedule.
Mm-hmm. So you take from that, but you learn from that, right? You learn, take the good, take the bad. So there's some real pros and cons there, So you get it to the point, like you said, so you're about 50-50, so you're doing well financially, it's working out well. What happens next that gets you on your own boat?
I think the drive for not being just a tooth mechanic, not just going in and checking teeth and saying cavities, no cavities, not just going in, drilling and filling, concept, the true concept of patient-centered care, where I have the time to develop those relationships with not just the patient, but with the family members. That's really what drove me to want to go from being an associate to being an owner.
Okay, so you're seeing over the 3 years, tell me if I'm off. You're saying, okay, this is great. You're learning, you're getting more comfortable, but then you're also saying, I think there's a better way. I think there's a better way, right?
Hmm.
So, at
For
what
me,
point though?
I think
does
there's a
that
better way for me.
Right, right, right. This is not really scratching my itch in what I want to accomplish as a professional.
Yes.
So, how does that coincide with the other doctor wanting to sell the practice? How does that fit? Like, in other words, if that didn't happen, would you have made the move to go on your own? Would you have bought something else? How did that whole timing thing work?
Yeah, I think if that didn't happen, I would have almost been forced to consider doing a from scratch startup.
Okay. So
There
you were
were,
that committed, right? So mentally
yeah,
you're committed that this is how I'm going to live my life and practice and treat the people I treat.
yes.
So you had your epiphany, you're like, I'm set. This is what I'm going to do. And do you approach the other doctor, or did the other doctor come to you? And was it like, this is a sign, like, this is a sign because I'm ready? Like, it had to be pretty unique.
For the doctor who I bought the practice from,
Yes.
yeah, she approached me. I made it very clear to her,
Yeah.
what I would love to do. And so when she was ready, she approached me.
Did you have conversations leading up to that? Like, this is where, like about those personal parts of your journey. Like, I think there's a better way I want to practice, and she kind of sensed that. And did that feed into it, or was she just literally like, okay, I'm ready?
She knew we did have those conversations, and
Okay.
I think that our shared values for her patient population was a big driving factor of her committing to have the conversation with me rather than just simply, selling it off to a DSO or something like
So you
that.
guys
She
really
did get lots
strengthened
of
your
those
relationship.
calls.
You really
I
strengthened your
spent-
relationship.
I
Yeah.
think I spent about 5 years prior to, purchasing it, strengthening that relationship.
So there has to be a tremendous comfort level, like she's almost handing it off to a family member.
Mhm.
And what was the transition like? Was it I'm out the door, you're in, or was it
Yep.
like let's practice together for a while?
She was at for reasons I'm not going to go into, it was as soon as we signed the contract, in transition, that was on a Friday, and on Monday I owned it, and it was me.
Gotcha. So you had to do all the introductions. Did you formulate a letter that went out? I mean, talk
Yeah.
about that transition. How did that work?
Mm-hmm. So for the first couple of months, she stayed at the front with it. We did formulate a letter. She formulated a letter introducing me, and then I formulated a letter also introducing myself, for that transition. And then we sent that letter out to every active patient. We had that pretty much like preset and ready to go. So then and printed and everything. So then once the paperwork was signed, it immediately went out in the mail. But there was still a 1 to 2 week time frame with the mail lag and patients that were already scheduled with it. And so we navigated that, just during appointment confirmations and whatnot to let them know. Fortunately, I worked very hard over the 5 years as well to create very strong relationships with the team members. So they all knew me, and they trusted my work and they trusted me, and they were really, hoping that this transition was going to happen with me. And so it was a very,
that's unique.
It was easy for them to be able to say, we have Dr. Adair here, and you guys are going to love her. And the patients could sense that it was a genuine trust in me.
It's authentic. Yeah. That takes a while. That's the biggest challenge. I remember myself when I went into the practice that I went into, having a lot of meetings, dinners, conversations, philosophy, getting to know me, getting to know them, and talking about how we were going to move, how the boat was going to look, how the boat was going to travel, how we would handle certain choppy waters, etc. And all those conversations laid down the framework for trust, and then being able to tell the patients, because you go in, you see a hygiene patient leave, the patient look over like, well, what do you think of him? Good guy. Like that's almost all you needed to say, right? Good guy, good person. Whatever it is, good family man, what you know what I mean? It's just whatever that connection was. My hygienist had a daughter who had serious heart issues. I had a baby born with transposition of the great vessels, so we had so much in common. And she was, when I started there, she was 5 months old. So I mean, we were new at this, and she had a child who had way more heart difficulties, but we had so many pediatric cardiologists and, in common. And to this day, we still work together. It's 30 years now, 31, 32 years. So, just developing those relationships. Whereas yourself, you laid that foundation prior. That's a little bit unique. It's pretty spectacular, actually. So let's talk about it. So you go in there, what did her business look like in terms of practice, makeup, insurance? How many did she participate in? Fee for service? What did that look like? What was the profile?
So her practice was, she was in network with 4 insurances. It was Delta Dental, MetLife, United Concordia, and then the United Concordia TRICARE.
Okay. So,
and I would say that comprised about 85 to 90%
took the words right out of my next question. Was how much percent? Yeah. Okay. So 9 out of 10. So basically, in a full day, you see 1 or 2, maybe 3 patients that weren't in one of these plans, on maybe something like that. Okay. So talk about getting out of network. How did it happen?
Okay. Well, here we go. I think so let's start with when I bought the practice, and where I was. The first 6 months to a year, I really tried not to change anything. The only thing that I did change was I signed the same insurance contracts as her, because I did not want to disrupt the boat right off the bat. I also added Aetna, and I added United Healthcare.
Oh my, okay.
And that was a fear-based addition. That is a regret.
Gotcha.
Out of it, because I was so concerned that with the transition that I would have a huge drop off of patients leaving, and that I wouldn't be able to sustain myself. That's a classic fear that I think young dentists, either
especially solo practitioners, they prey on solo practitioners.
Yeah. And so those 2 I added on with it. Other than that, I didn't really change too much at all with the practice, because
you went in the other direction first.
I did. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. And this year is 2018 now, 2019.
The very end of 2018, so we'll call it 2019.
Okay.
Good.
All right.
So I did, use a lot of different key practice KPIs to just keep an eye on things, because before I made any decisions about things, I really needed to establish a baseline and see what trends I have. And I gave that, about 2 to 3 years of that. But then, of course, 2020 hit, and that kind of put a little blip in my data. But okay, the long story short is, after a couple of years, what I realized is that for every dollar that I'm producing, I'm only making 60 cents.
40% write-off.
40% write-off.
So even in a fairly lean practice, and pediatric practice, if I'm not mistaken, due to the number of auxiliaries, they're higher, right? They're higher.
Yeah,
overheads.
our payroll, part of our overhead, I think, is, a much higher percentage, because we have to have a 1-to-1 ratio of assistant or somebody with one patient.
Right. So just, I would imagine, let's say lean and mean pediatric practice, a 60% overhead probably is reasonable. No.
Yeah.
So you're working for nothing then if you have 40% write-off.
Yeah.
Assuming those patients show up.
Yeah.
Wow.
And what was wild is that back in 2019, if I look at my profits, I had fewer patients in 2019 compared to 2021, because I was growing in volume, I was growing in production, but I also had to grow in team members and staffing. Where if I compared my profits from 2019 with 2021, I profited more in 2019 because I had fewer team members compared to 2021, but my production was significantly higher, but my
You're working
profit was
harder
less.
and making less.
Yeah.
You're the exact opposite. You want to earn more, work less. That's the formula.
Yeah. And so then I'm, in my head, I'm like, what am I doing wrong? Like,
You have an epiphany then.
Yeah. And I'm like, am I a bad business owner? Am I spending too much on these things and whatnot? But then that's where I think the mentorship part of it came in. And another huge mentor in this process is Dr. Weiss, Arnie Weiss. He's a pediatric dentist up in Massachusetts. And, just kind of looking through the data and having that epiphany of like, no, I'm not the problem. I'm not a bad business owner. The problem is that I'm writing off 40% of this because of these contracts. And 90% of my practice is PPO based with it. And so, then it was like, with that epiphany, it's like, okay, well, where do I go from here? Okay, here's where I'm at. I'm at max capacity with how many patients I can see within this small space that I have. I've built up my team with it, but if I'm going to grow anymore, I either have to expand hours and get an associate. Well, that's not really going to make me much profit, because that's going to cost a lot of money to do that. Or I have to move spaces to have more chairs and, continue this, high volume thing, or I'm going to cut the fat.
Yeah.
And so
your trajectory, if you think about it, what your trajectory is, right? Like you just described it. I'm working harder, I'm producing more, and my profit is going in the other direction. It's going down. So you have to get off the hamster wheel at some point, or you can't do what they like, just do more, that you make it up on volume, and it's economies of scale and all this other nonsense that's being sold to us on this situation with insurance plans, that, oh yeah, you can make it up. No, you can't. At some point in time, I have 2 hands, right? I have X number of rooms. And like you said, I'm doing as much as I can. you're at, okay, maybe you can add a 5%, 10%. Let's just assume maybe. It's not going to make any difference because 40% of it's going right out the window. You know,
Yeah.
you're taking a match and you're lighting that dollar bill, and it comes right up to George Washington's head, then it stops, and then you got 60% of a dollar left. You know, what it is.
Yeah. I
So,
mean, let's say I was producing close to $1 million. I was paying a $400,000 marketing bill to the insurance companies.
So now you got to live off the 6 and pay all your bills. Now, well, one question I want to ask you about when with the negotiation with the purchase, was it just really straightforward, fair number? Like, was there anything that you had to, that you looking back on it, you would do maybe differently, or you just said, listen, this was just as smooth as butter, you know?
No, looking back, it was pretty straightforward. I mean, I think in any sort of a practice, the buyer thinks that they're overpaying and the seller thinks that they're
Right.
not making enough, but
That's a good deal, right?
then
Both sides
yeah.
feel they compromised a little bit. I same thing for me. The
Yep.
same thing, 100%. So okay, so now you got this. You finally you've seen the light, and so what happens next? What do you do?
Okay, so what do I do?
You have your elbows on your knees moment again with
Yeah,
Christine?
kind of. I focused, I listened to Christine, love peace, Dr. Christine.
Love her.
I you know, actually your website, the Fee for Service website, listening to the podcasts, following her posts, and really learning from others who have gone through this before, that was my first step. You know, and that happened from 2019 to 2021.
Okay.
As I was gathering the data for my office. And so that was step one, is I had to learn myself, you know, and get comfortable with it. And I had to get the team buy-in. And getting the team buy-in was, I think, maybe one of the toughest steps, because
Since that's all they know.
off of fear. Right. I
And
remember
now their best
back
friends
then,
and these children they've raised are going to leave, right? That's the fear.
Yeah. And they're like, oh, nobody's gonna want to come to us. You know, the whole practice is gonna just fall apart, you know.
And then it comes like, I'm not going to get paid. I'm going to lose my job. And,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. So
Yeah.
it has deeper levels to it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I started really, really small. And so my first step that I took of like dipping my toe in the water was just getting out of all the LACE networks. It was insane so I thought I was only contracted with Delta Dental, MetLife, United, Concordia, and the TRICARE. But when we looked at
Aetna, but you said you added Aetna on another.
Oh, yeah, and Aetna, you're right, and Aetna and United Healthcare. But when I actually dove into that, those were my perceived in network.
Yeah. You have all these umbrella policies.
Right? But then the actual ones with the umbrella policies was out the roof insane. So, you know, fortunately with Virginia, we had, you know, legislation in place in our state. I think they were actually pretty advanced, you know, progressive with that, where it was not hard for me to opt out of the majority of those umbrella contracts. So that was my first step with it. And so then once we started getting some information coming in as those small number of patients that were now out of network with us, my administrative team was able to see, you know, how it worked, how the insurance process worked as out of network providers with that. They were able to get a little bit more of a understanding.
That's interesting. Nobody's brought that up. That's interesting. So they learned how to become out of network by dealing out of network with some very small numbers. That's a really interesting point. Nobody's brought that up.
And that was, and that gained for them a lot of confidence in being able to answer some of the questions that we knew were going to be coming up. So
I would also think too, there's a little success, right? You're having some success. You're not losing everybody. So listen, you know, Chicken Little, the sky is falling. The sky is actually not falling. You know, So
Yeah,
yeah.
we actually lost maybe no patients by doing that. It was very like just
So bottom line is going to
non-eventful.
improve a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
go ahead.
it was not eventful. And so then the next step was creating a plan and sticking with it. Where, I set down the team and I said, we're going to start with this insurance. This is I started with United Healthcare. They paid they had my highest reimbursement rates, but even though I went contracted with them, they didn't bring in any patients for me by being contracted. By being a network provider, I didn't really get any new patients. It was just
Well,
the
that's
same.
interesting.
It was like the same patients that were there.
The first one you cut is your highest reimbursing,
Mhm.
but you looked at it from the quote marketing side because you said, listen, I'm paying $400,000 a year for my marketing, right? And they ain't marketing for me.
Correct.
Well, that's another unique thing. Nobody's really brought that aspect up. So that's fascinating. Okay. Yeah, yeah. Because I think there's multiple ways to do this, and there's no wrong way to do this. I think at this point, because you already you've got the mindset, we're going this direction, here we go, here's how we're sailing, and here's how we're going to set the course. So I love it, but this is a uniqueness here. The marketing portion of it, nobody really taps on that. So when you're looking at your numbers, how did you determine that nobody's coming in? You just didn't have a lot of new patients that you were seeing from United Healthcare? What was the number? How'd that work out?
I compared my from 2019 when I just purchased the practice. I compared my percentage of patients with each insurance network from 2019 to 2021. And I compared like number of patient with percentage, of the practice. And nothing really changed in terms of the percentage of patients on whether I was from prior to me with the new contracts that I had brought in, the Aetna and the United Healthcare. It didn't really, it had no help for me from a marketing standpoint.
So when they say know your numbers, folks, this is know your numbers. This is spelled out right now. So this is looking at some historical data that you have. You're not, you don't need, 15,000 people to give you advice. You're looking at your actual data, and you're not even extrapolating. You're looking at actual data, and you're making informed business decisions based on facts. I love it. I just love it. Okay. So you decide, okay, that's the first branch to go. How
Yep.
does that go? And how long do you do that? 6 months, a year?
I sequentially dropped each insurance every quarter.
Every quarter?
Every 3 months.
You go, girl.
I did that because
we ain't turning back.
We are not messing around. And my team actually pushed me to do that. They said,
I love it.
Once you get the momentum for it, and again, me being military based, I had an SOP for it. I wrote down that SOP of what we did with the first insurance drop. And then, if we had to tweak it a little bit, for the next one, we did.
I was going to ask you, did you tweak it? Do you remember? Did you have to tweak it much?
No, so here's what we did. We sent the notification to the insurance company that we were going out of network. We put a note in our practice management software that 2 weeks after my notification, we were making a phone call follow-up to make sure that they acknowledged my notification and that we have
So this is to the insurance company.
This is to the insurance company.
Okay.
And I do think that follow-up after you send that notification out is extremely important, or else they'll just kind of drag it on and on and on and on. Of course. And so we're like this persistent, annoying, little itch that the insurance company can't get rid of until, they acknowledge us.
Yeah, he's a neighbor's kid who doesn't shut up.
Yeah, that was us. And so we had that as soon as I got that confirmed date of when I was going to be out of network, that's when we sent the letter out to the families so that there would be no, confusion with when that timing was.
So you sent that letter out. Now, in response to that, you sent the letter out. Did the insurance company send their letter out, and did one beat the other?
No, I beat them because we had them pre-printed
Yeah.
and they went right in the mail as soon as we got that confirmation with the insurance company.
Now, the confirmation insurance company had to come by paper, right? It wasn't going to be from the phone call. They had to confirm it via
Correct.
paper to you.
And
Which
I'm kind of
was
old
like
school.
pulling
I
teeth
printed
with that.
that and I saved it, or
Yeah.
through email or fax or but yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Good for you.
Okay. I did not go the route of talking to every single patient prior to. I went the route of notifying them that at their next appointment, we would be an out-of-network provider as of this date. And the reason for that is because when we schedule our appointments, we schedule them 6 months out. And as you remember, 90% of my practice is prevention, recalls. And so if I gave them notification, then I would have to delay it by 6 months at least if I'm having a conversation. And then they're maybe going to get wet feet on scheduling their appointments 6 months moving forward. If I notify them when they already have an appointment scheduled that's coming up in like 2 or 3 months, our opinion, my team and I had decided, let's do it this way because they may at least try at one time with me being an out-of-network provider, and we can go through that billing process, and then, maybe it won't be so bad for them to stay with us.
So what was the results, or at least your feeling the results were of doing it this way? Did you, in other words, you're calling 2 weeks prior, 1 out of 10 patients said, nope, cancel me. I mean, what did it look like?
It didn't look that bad until I dropped Delta.
Well, Delta was probably what, 40%, 50% of your practice?
30, I think.
Yeah, so the lion's share.
Yeah. With that. The others were pretty open to just staying with it. I would say maybe 10 to 15% of the patients would decide not to, would cancel their appointment.
So 10 out of 5, so maybe one, for a hygiene column, maybe one patient, maybe 2.
Yeah.
Okay.
It wasn't what I thought, what we all fear it was going to be.
Talk about validation.
Yeah. And by doing it one insurance at a time, it did not affect my entire schedule. So let's say, for example, when I dropped United Healthcare, well, they were only like 1 or 2%. So that was, really, yeah. The next one was Aetna. Aetna was about 10% of my practice. So again, it still wasn't a big blip, 1 out of 10%
Sure.
of patients. And then the next one was United Concordia. That one was a little bit more with it because United Concordia, I want to say, is maybe 20% of my practice. And so we felt it a little bit more. But once we saw that our collections didn't change, even though we were less busy, that was a form of validation when we moved forward with the more higher percentage insurances, which is the MetLife and then finally the Delta Dental. So throughout each sequential drop, we did see fewer volume, but our collections remained the same.
Now, you didn't talk about this, but I want to ask you how you determined your sequence. And you said on average it was 40%. I would imagine Delta might have been a higher percentage of write-off.
Oh, I had that. I know what that is. Yeah, let me see if I can.
Yeah, you said United, the one United Healthcare was a higher reimbursing. So let's say they paid 70% of your fee.
Yeah. So in terms of percent insurance write-off, I'll do it that way. The amount, my
Sure.
marketing fee, okay? My marketing fee to Delta Dental was 50%.
50%.
Mhm.
50.
Yeah.
So you would be better off telling the Delta patients to stay home than come in.
Kind of.
Because it costs you 10 cents on the dollar for every patient that walks through the door, minimum.
Mhm.
If you're a 60% overhead.
Right.
So
So
you're better
then-
off giving them a dollar, tell them go buy their own coffee, stay away. No, just go ahead. Go.
Yeah. Yeah. United
So that's
Concordia was about the same, was 50%.
so
And
did that factor into your sequence? Or what was the determining factor on how you were like you said, the
Mhm.
first one you dropped because there was no payout for the marketing.
Mhm.
So did you do that with all the
went-
other ones? How did
Most
you?
of mine, when I look back at my data, my dropping sequence, I did it based on my percent of active patients in the practice. So I went from the lowest
Yeah, so
percent
you
to
took this,
the highest
yeah.
percent, so that each
That
step
makes sense.
along the way,
Least
we
impact.
knew. Yeah, yeah.
I
And my team
I
was able
like
to
that
gain those
approach.
skills. Yeah, my team could gain the skills of knowing when we sent that letter out, how long they were going to have to, how many weeks they were going to have to spend answering a bunch of phone calls for it, which is about 2 to 4 weeks. And then they just gained more and more confidence in managing that, so that when we went to that higher percentage of patients that it affected, they could more efficiently manage that.
Anybody on your team really struggle with that conversation? Like really, really challenged?
No.
Okay. I've seen one person I'll never forget said someone was so good at it that that was their that became their job. They were sort of like the hostess, if you will. And they were the liaison. So, oh yeah, hold on, let me get Sally, she'll explain that.
Mhm.
You know, kind of like that
Yeah.
person really was a genius at wordsmithing and being able to communicate well. So this is cool. You got
Yeah,
everybody
I only
on
have
board.
like two. Well, I only have 2 people that really manage the phones, and they both were phenomenal at it. So
Right, but you don't have people like when they come in, they're coming to the back. They're not asking the hygienist. You know, like the mom is sitting there and says, "Why are you doing this?" No, doesn't come up.
yeah, I mean, we do that. Like if there's questions about that, we do
Yeah.
keep it with the administrative side of things and not with the clinical side of things.
Nice, beautiful. Okay, so do you have results tracked on how you did with each of the particular plans, or because you said about 10 or 15%?
When I look at the percentage of patients with those plans in my office, it's really not that much different now than what it was when I was in network with it, other than Delta. Delta dropped a fair amount, but again, because of the amount of write-off, it was fine. It opened up space for full fee for service.
Right, but people have those plans, but you're out of network with those plans, so that's irrelevant to me.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
So the most important thing now is, okay, right? Your schedule picks up, your bottom line's got to go well up, right? Because you're not burning money.
Mm-hmm.
And the impact, right? So what's the overall result in terms of retention? Because that's people's biggest fear, right?
So I would say this was the trend that I noticed in my practice. It took a year and a half percent of my practice.
Big number.
Yeah, but I can do that. I did my research and I know this is the amount I can, sustain and still profit. Anyway, the first 6 months after being completely out of network with with everyone, that I think was the kind of like the settling in stage, you know, and the adjustment stage. And then once we got to about the year mark to year and a half mark, that's after that. Now everything has leveled off, and
You're hitting
now
your groove.
I'm in that regrowth stage now. And I would say at about the year and a half mark from being going through that out of network process. Profit comfortably without killing myself. But I'm never going to be one that's going to be making millions of dollars. But you know, that's
Right,
not.
but you're
I
being
care about.
compensated fairly, right?
Yeah.
And you're not but my question is, I probably should phrase it better,
Sorry.
because everybody asks, and everybody's concerned as well. If you drop these plans, you know, 70% of your patients are going to go. Do you have any idea what the number is of patients that left because of your change in policies? Or we'll take it this percentage of patients that stayed.
Yeah, I would say 70% of my patients stayed.
So just do the math. 30% leave. You know, that's a 40% discount. You know, to get to level up ain't gonna take much.
No, and it really doesn't. So now moving forward, every level up is profit.
Yeah. Now let me ask you this question, because you said that about TRICARE 30%. But you're at 30%. Let's say you're at 30%. Did you say, okay, we're not taking any more new patients in TRICARE?
We keep pretty close tabs on, you know, the numbers of patients that I see with TRICARE to keep it within that percentage. And yeah, they may have the new patients sometimes have to get pushed a little bit later in order to do that.
So that's how you do it, huh?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, well, that takes some real discipline. I give you a lot of credit. I don't have that kind of discipline. I'll be honest with you. Hell no. I just kind of have a feel. Like, I don't like the way this feels. This doesn't feel right. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I kudos to you. You really know your shit. Let me tell you. This is really cool. All right. So advice. What would you share with anybody thinking of doing this?
I'd say the biggest advice is having a circle of individuals who you can lean on for the emotional side of it. So that we stick with the plan. You know, you commit, you make a plan, and you stick with it. If you need to adjust as needed, you adjust as needed. But not letting the emotions drive your decisions. Make data-driven decisions.
So important, but it's so hard because we're human and we're dealing with human, right? In a very high anxiety, anxious setting, it takes its toll.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and it's like it takes a little piece of you. You know, there's a little piece chipped out of you here, but you know, like these little, you know, a friend of mine, Dwayne Schmidt, had a drawing, and it was an older guy, and it was a drawing of himself, and he had a black eye, and he had a bandage on his head, and he had his arm in a sling, and he was using a crutch, but he had a smile on his face. And his point was, dentistry and life are going to beat you up, but the most important part of that picture is a smile on my face. You know, so so along the way, you're going to get these dings, and as you perfectly put it, you need that circle. You need those folks around you that you can lean on when you need to. And I couldn't agree more every way, shape, or form with that statement. 100%.
Yeah.
So well said. Okay, so last question. We're going to put up on the show, so you're going to share with us how you can reach Dr. Adair. Did I say it right, or do you pronounce it Adair? How do you pronounce your name?
No, you were correct, Adair.
Adair. Okay. Look at that. I'm 1 for 50. All right. Good job. All right. So how they can reach you, we'll put that in the show notes. And I know that you've spoken and you've done some presentations on some of this stuff, and super, super helpful. And thank you very much. Last question, if you could go anywhere back in time, anywhere, do anything, see anybody, what experiences would you want to have?
Oh. Man, I don't know. If I could go back in time, I'm going to be honest with you. I'm at a loss for words because I guess I'm always trying to just look forward and see, see what we're going to do moving forward.
Another first. Okay, well, appreciate it. It's just interesting. Everybody's perspective on that is different, and I just like to ask that. And I at some point in time, I would love to put together a little synopsis of like a little clip of everybody's answer to that question. It would be so much fun to hear. So anyway, appreciate you. Would love to have you come back on and give us an update how things are going. Will you do that? Will you hit me up in maybe 6 months or so and let's reconnect. Let's have another conversation.
Absolutely. I'd be
All
honored.
right. Thank you very much. As always, Dr. Amy Adair in Virginia, pediatric dentist who has happily shared her experiences on the positive side of how you can take back control of your practice and ultimately your life. But she talks about the emotional side too. So 100%. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Fee for Service Dentist Podcast. If you would like to share your fee for service story, please fill out our contact form at ffsdentistry.com. Also, be sure to join our Fee for Service Dentistry Facebook group. For help starting your dental membership plan, visit dentalmembershipdirect.com and membershipmastercourse.com. Finally, for help with in-house financing, visit dentalfinancingdirect.com. And don't forget, your story is what you make of it. This is your name on the door and your reputation on the line. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next time.
This has been a Rogue Media Network production.